And one of the things that really struck me was who we are as children looks so different than who we are as adults. Because I'm absolutely convinced that there has never been an ordinary human being born on the face of the earth. But the reality is that most of us die tragically ordinary lives. There was a man named George Land who was hired by NASA to identify geniuses for the NASA program. And so he created this genius assessment that really measured human creativity. And they took about 1,600 children from the ages of 3 to 5, and they measured genius in these children to identify, to filter out the geniuses so that NASA could develop them. And the crazy thing they found was that 98% of children at the age of 5 all tested out as geniuses. And so they tracked those children in a longitudinal study, and when they were 10 years old, only 30% of them still tested out as geniuses. And they followed them another 5 years until they were 15 years old, and only 12% of them tested out as geniuses. And then they did a follow-up study with 280,000 people, average age of 31, and only 2% of humans tested out as geniuses. And so what it tells us is that human beings are actually born with extraordinary capacity, that every human being essentially is born a genius, but somewhere along the way, your genius will get beat out of you. It'll be extricated out of your soul. You'll be convinced that you're just ordinary. And you'll live your life admiring the genius of others, or maybe even envying it, but never knowing that that genius was always intrinsically a part of who you were and who you are. I'm convinced the reason you're here is because there's this tension inside of you that you're not everything you know you should become. That you have longings inside of you. There's a craving in you. There's this desperation that there's genius inside of you, but you cannot figure out how to awaken it and how to unlock it. So you come to summits of greatness so that maybe, just maybe, in one moment, something could change inside of you and unlock that greatness that lives within you. And so you're here because you refuse to give up on your uniqueness and the uniqueness of others. I am absolutely convinced that all of us as human beings are far more capable than we could ever imagine. That in fact, all of us as human beings are both works of art and artists at work. See, I think this is why we're all intrinsically spiritual. Because we human beings can take our imagination and translate it to something extraordinary and see it played out in the material world. And we think, wow, I just dreamed that, I imagined that. That came out of this invisible space, and it was translated into reality. I'm a person who has come to believe in God. It shocks me. It does. When I saw that Lewis wrote down I was a minister, I was really uncomfortable. I have never used that phrase in my entire life. Because I don't think of myself as an occupation or designation. I just think of myself as a human who does different things. But I remember I was at Columbia University. I finally made it into an Ivy League school. I was just a guest speaker, but still, it counts. And I didn't know it was a debate. There were 500 professors and students there, and they had a huge sign that said the conference was about what can be known. Now, I didn't know. That's one thing that could have been known. And all of a sudden, they had their senior scientist, and he talked about what can be known is what can be empirically proven. And I thought, that's good. I agree 100%. That can be known. And then they had the head of the Department of Humanities, a Kantian philosopher, and she said, what can be known as human actions, ethics. And I thought, that's true, too. I agree with that. And they read their introductions. I mean, they had typed out introductions. And then it was my turn. And I said, well, what can be known is I should have prepared my introduction better. And I said, the problem is that you guys are expert on what can be known. I'm an expert on what is unknown. Because you see, that the past is what we can know. And the present is shaped by what we can know, but the future is all about what is unknown. That's far more important. And at the end, we had this Q&A, and they had like 500 Q&A cards, and almost every question was for the guy who actually believed in God. And what was amazing to me is I had this one question I'll never forget. It said, when you were a child, you had imaginary friends like Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, and God. Why did you keep God when you got rid of Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy? That's such a great question. I just love brilliant questions when you're asked those publicly. Like, it's just wonderful, right? You know, and I said, first of all, you clearly don't know me if you think I've given up on my imaginary friends, because they're the only friends I have, really. And they've stayed with me my entire life, and they're good with me, I'm good with them, so let's just, you know. But you're right, I had imaginary friends like Santa Claus and the Tooth Fairy and the giant rabbit that hid in my closet that was incredibly mean. But actually, I didn't actually believe in God. He was an occasional guest in my imagination, but you know, when my son was 3, he would not eat my wife's cooking, but he would go outside and eat dirt and rocks. And every day we'd put him at the table, he would not eat Kim's cooking, and then he'd eat outside, eat dirt and rocks. And one day I said to my wife, honey, do you realize that our son won't eat your food, but he will eat dirt and rocks? And she says, what are you saying? I said, I'm just making an observation. I'm not saying anything. And I said, but I have an idea. Why don't we just throw the food in the backyard and see how it goes? And then Kim said, you should not be a parent. But just because my son was eating dirt and rocks at the age of 3, we did not give up on eating. We just understood that he had to learn what was good for him and what wasn't, what was real, what wasn't. See, yes, I had imaginary friends as a child, but why would I give up on my imagination? See, maybe in the same way that we have imaginary friends, maybe there's a God who created our imagination as the playground where we can actually commune with him. And he can keep expanding our vision and keep expanding our dreams, and he could keep removing the borders of our imagination so that we could see a future yet to be created. They say that at the age of 12, your brain decides what you're good at. Well, by the age of 12, I wasn't good at math or English or science or geology or geography or any other subject that was taught in school. But I was really good at living in an imaginary world. And I'm so grateful now at 64 that that's my principal competency. Because the world desperately needs people who imagine a future that does not exist. Because the future humanity needs most lives right now in someone's imagination, if you'll only have the courage to turn it into a reality.